This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. I'm Amy Goodman. Palestinian officials and human rights groups are denouncing the move by the United States and at least 12 other countries to temporarily suspend funding to UNRWA. That's the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, after Israel accused 12 UNRWA employees of helping Hamas stage the October 7th attack. 9 of the employees have been fired. UNRWA said 2 of the accused employees are dead. UNRWA is one of the largest employers in Gaza, with a staff of over 13,000. It provides aid to most of Gaza's 2.3 million residents. The agency's long been targeted by Israel. Since Israel's assault on Gaza began, over 150 UNRWA staffers have been killed. Francesca Albanese, UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territory, said on social media, quote, "The day after ICJ concluded that Israel's plausibly committing genocide in Gaza, some states decide to defund UNRWA, collectively punishing millions of Palestinians at the most critical time and most likely violating their obligations under the Genocide Convention," unquote. Meanwhile, UNRWA chief Philippe Lazzarini condemned the freezing of the funds at a time when famine looms in Gaza. He said, quote, "Palestinians in Gaza did not need the additional collective punishment. This stains all of us," he said. And the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has urged donor nations to continue supporting UNRWA. For more, we're going to Oslo, Norway, where we're joined by Jan Egeland, Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council. Norway's decided to continue its funding of UNRWA. Jan, thanks so much for being with us. Can you start off by responding to the cutting off of funding at a time when, among other things, Gaza is under bombardment and is on the edge of famine?
Yeah, it's the worst possible reaction to these allegations that some, maybe a dozen of the 13,000 UNRWA aid workers betrayed our humanitarian principles of neutrality and independence and participated in the horrific attacks on Israel. That, however, was met immediately with the response of UNRWA by, as you said, firing these staff and now having an independent investigation. What the donors did, the US, the UK, Germany, Italy, Finland, Netherlands, Australia, and some others, did was to cut all aid to the children of Gaza, to the women in Gaza, to the completely innocent there. It's the worst possible move at the time when this trapped population is under bombardment. Do not punish the many innocent for the sins of a few who did very wrong, it seems.
Now it'll be interesting to see if Israel hands over the evidence for the UN to investigate this situation, because we're talking about an immediate cutoff by many of these nations suspending weapons. I wanted to read you a clip of the former Israeli official Noga Arbel, who said it'll be impossible to win the war if we do not destroy UNRWA, and this destruction must begin immediately. The Prime Minister, Netanyahu, said there will be no UNRWA in post-war Gaza. Your response, Jan Egeland, and talk about you're the head of a large humanitarian aid group. How important is UNRWA to all of the groups, not to mention the people on the ground?
UNRWA is completely essential. I mean, it's true that I lead the NRC, Norwegian Refugee Council. We're a large humanitarian group across the world. We're on all sides of all conflict lines for the displaced and the refugees. And we've been in Gaza for 2 decades. We've been funded all over the world by the United States and by 40 other donor nations and international agencies. In Gaza, we have to recognize that all of us combined, other groups, are not even close to be what UNRWA is for the people of Gaza. UNRWA was a response to the creation of Israel and the 1948 war that displaced so many of the original Palestinian population to Gaza, to the West Bank, and elsewhere. UNRWA was then created to give them relief and works. Since then, there's not been a political, peaceful settlement. And that is because the international community has not been able to force the parties, Israel and the Palestinians, to settle this conflict. And thereby, we end up by having humanitarian groups like, first and foremost, UNRWA, provide for the population. So to undermine and undercut UNRWA, as extremists within the Israeli government are doing, is basically to say we're going to punish the women and children, the innocent, on the other side for what some extremists have done in a situation of utter turmoil and perpetuous conflict that we're not ourselves willing to try to settle with talks on a future. It's very wrong, and the international donors must stay with the humanitarian organizations like Norway did. Norway is a large donor, giving much more per capita to Palestinians and elsewhere than any other donor. We stay with UNRWA, and we say, good that you terminated all of those contracts and fired these people, and good that there is an investigation, and then we'll draw the conclusions what we should do for the future.
Jan Egeland, what evidence is there of Israel's charges? Have they handed over the evidence?
As far as I know, it's not been received by UNRWA or by the UN investigators. I hope they will be received so that they can do a thorough investigation of this. Very serious allegations. I read about them in the New York Times. And if it's true, again, they betrayed all of our principles, really, neutrality, impartiality, etc. That is so important for us who are unarmed humanitarian workers in the crossfire around the world. But of course, no one who's working across the Middle East can guarantee that there are not people within our midst that may, in the end, have hidden agendas. Palestinians cannot do that. Israeli cannot do that. We know of many Israelis who've done very bad things in Gaza, shooting at people with white flags. It's documented in detail. They've even shot their own people with white flags. They have settler organizations, mafia-style settler organizations, displacing unarmed women and children and families across the West Bank. Many of these are recruited to the Israeli Defense Forces. They belong in jail, but they are in the Israeli Defense Force. No one can guarantee that there are not problems. Therefore, they have to be investigated, and there has to be action taken every time something happens. But don't cut funding to people in great need. It's the worst possible response.
Jan Egeland, I want to thank you for being with us, Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council, speaking to us from Oslo. I'm Amy Goodman. This is another edition of Democracy Now!